Good evening. I shall resign the presidency at noon tomorrow.
This is an historic day, the only time a president has ever resigned from office.
Nixon knew about the Watergate cover-up.
The man who has committed the greatest felony in American history will never stand trial.
I've had an idea for an interview. Richard Nixon.
You're a talk show host.
I spent yesterday watching you interview the Bee Gees.
Weren't they terrific?
Why would I want to talk to David Frost?
I got $500,000.
Really?
Well, obviously, playing Frost and Frank playing Nixon, we both did the stage play for about 16 months before we came to do the film. So we had at least we knew the lines when we came to do the film. I suppose a lot of people talk about having to bring it down for a camera, and act smaller and all that kind of stuff. And I mean that might be one of the end results of the process, but I don't think it helps to focus on that. I think that the most important thing is to be really appropriate in your response to the other actors. So, for instance, if you're on stage, obviously there's a certain amount of projection that has to happen. You want to fill the room. You want to make sure that the person sitting in the very back of the auditorium gets as good a show as the person at the front, even though it might be a slightly different show. So that you have to have all the basics of what's going on for you as an actor and as a character. And then you have to sort of do another stage, which is then to sort of project it out. On film, I find that as long as I'm listening to the other actors and then reacting appropriately to them, then the performance itself either gets more projected or less projected, depending on that. So the most important thing that I need to focus on is, when you're surrounded by film actors, wonderful actors like Sam Rockwell and Oliver Platt, and Kevin Bacon and Matthew McFadden and all the people who are in the film, as long as I'm listening to them and not just thinking, well, my next line I'm going to do like this, having an idea about what you're going to do, but just to trust and listen and then respond appropriately to them, then hopefully the performance will be a film-sized performance without having to concentrate on that, if you see what I mean. What I've really enjoyed about working on film over the last few years, I suppose, is the challenge of it, in that, like I said, on stage there's, you have to have everything, the reality of the inner life of the character going on, and all the basics of what the character wants and what the obstacles are in the way of him getting it, and what he's going to try and do to get around those obstacles, and all those sort of basics of acting. And then there's this other stage about sort of projecting it out, or maybe trying to find quite bold strokes, depending on the size of the theatre, I suppose, in how you portray what's going on for the character. Whereas on film, as long as it's just going on inside you, the camera picks it up. So there's a certain amount of potential covering up that can go on in the theatre. You can, essentially acting, I find, is a fairly scary process, in that you're sort of on display, you're being watched, and it's a very exposing, vulnerable-making process. And a lot of what I've discovered as an actor is that you try to protect yourself against that, being exposed and vulnerable. But the more vulnerable you can allow yourself to be, and the less you try to defend yourself against those things, then the better the work. Now on film, there's less opportunity to defend yourself against that vulnerable moment, because the camera is right there. There's nothing between you and the audience in some respects. And that's as challenging and as exposing as that can be. It's a sort of a thrilling prospect as well, and allows for, in some ways, a much richer inner life to come across to an audience.
Frost is just not in your intellectual class, sir. You're going to be able to dictate terms, rebuild your reputation. If this went well, if enough people saw it, revised their opinion, you could move back east way earlier than we expected.
I think.
I'm certain.
It would be. It's so good to go back to where the action is. The hunger in my belly is still there, John. I guess it all boils down to Watergate, huh?
That's nothing to worry about, sir. It's not as if there's going to be any revelations.
when we were rehearsing the play, Peter said that he thought it would be a good idea not to go and see Frost as part of my research, which was quite peculiar given that, you know, I've played a lot of real-life characters over the last few years, and it was the only time really that I could have gone to talk to the person I was playing, because a lot of the other people were either recently dead or inaccessible in the case of Blair, where I just couldn't go and meet him. So I was sort of quite taken aback when Peter said that, but I realized the wisdom of it eventually, because Peter's concern was that because Frost is a very charming and engaging man, that if I'd sort of developed a relationship with him too early in the process, it could have led to me sort of being a bit more resistant about going down certain avenues with the portrayal of the character and exploring certain areas. So I realized that it did make sense. So I didn't go and see him. But then everywhere I went during rehearsals, I would see him. I'd bump into him or almost bump into him. So I had to hide from him all the time. Well, the directors that I've worked with, I've been incredibly fortunate to work with directors who have a huge respect for acting. On the set of Frost Nixon every day when we were doing the film of Frost Nixon, Ron would sort of just come in like almost like a schoolboy, kind of skipping into in there and just saying how much he was enjoying doing this film, because he said that he got into filmmaking and he loves making films because of being able to work with actors, and he said that he's found that he's less and less been able to work on pieces that are character driven and that are more about the performances, and I think he loved doing that, and that showed in the way that he worked on it, that he really he had a lot of respect for what we were doing as performers and actors, and really kind of allowed us, and that was partly to do with the fact that he was being very sensitive about the fact that me and Frank had done the play for so long, but he really allowed us to own what we were doing and to feel like we were collaborators rather than being, just give direction all the time.